This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
We've got some time now for some questions. I think a couple of people are going to be going around with some roving mics. If you could wait for the mic because of it picking up on the video, thanks. Okay, any questions then?
Thank you. Gracias, Danilo. My name is Sarah Chandler. I'm a member of the Law Society and President of the Human Rights Commission for the Law Society of England and Wales, and President of the Human Rights Commission for the Federation of European Bar Associations, which represents about 800,000 lawyers in Europe. My question is, what are the risks that the lawyers who represent those people in rural communities face in representing them in respect of land restitution and protection of the environment?
Son diversos los riesgos, desde las estigmatizaciones, que son las mismas que ocurren con las comunidades, donde se plantea que están vinculadas a organizaciones criminales, particularmente las guerrillas. Una segunda acusación infundada es que se quiere imposibilitar el progreso. Una segunda que tiene que ver con amenazas de muerte, con campañas de difamación en medios de información y otras ocasiones con procesos judiciales que surgen con montajes testigos pagos, que son falsos, por supuesto, donde se pretende desprestigiar e imposibilitar la labor legítima de protección de los derechos de las comunidades rurales.
Well, there are several risks. There is the stigmatization, the same as some communities face, and then there is also there's often accused of being linked to criminal organizations, especially to the guerrilla. Sometimes it's said as well that they are against progress. And thirdly, they also receive death threats. There are also campaigns that want to give them a bad image in the media, and even criminal proceedings against them where false witnesses give their statement, and the purpose of this is to take away to make them look like non-reliable people, and in such a way making all their work in the ground, in the rural communities, look unreliable and not untrue.
Any more questions? Also from the ambassador, he's willing to take questions as well.
That's a question for the ambassador, really. Perhaps not. I mean, you gave this metaphor of this train running through with the wagons of social justice being drawn, and all we're going to do is kind of just keep it on the tracks. I think there's an accuracy in that in some way. Someone I worked with in Colombia was a consultant, community consultant. The government bring him in, mining companies would bring him in, and he described the mining project as a train. It wasn't going to be stopped. They were just going to have to learn to enjoy it, as he would say. So in that way, the metaphor works. But in describing the economy and social justice, it's going to fall apart very quickly. This isn't a sort of train on a track with a few nudges. I don't think it describes the English economy. Certainly the Colombian economy at a local level, it won't sustain it. It's not just a question of a couple of bad guys who just need to be kept off the tracks. It's an economy which is complex and mixed in with criminality, politics and economic opportunity in multifarious ways. And I realise you're new to the job and you're going to be hit hard when you arrive, but I mean, I guess my question to you is really to sort of reflect on that slightly, and what other challenges do you think there are going to be, well, for you, for the British government, which has so much interest in mining? We've been there from the beginning of Colombian mining.
So I should have asked you to give. Would you mind giving your name?
Oh, sorry, I'm Jonathan Newman, University of Sussex.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the question. I mean, I think it's a good one and gets to the heart of the issues that we'll be discussing in the course of today. Mining is a complex industry. It's also a very old industry in Colombia. I think gold mining in Colombia began thousands of years ago. And I think the pottery that's been discovered in Colombia from clay mining is some of the oldest pottery in that part of the world. So in some ways the industry itself isn't new. And I think the complications that surround it aren't new either. And what I would say is, I think train metaphors work in different ways in mining, and I think there's no doubt that there's a lot of power and a lot of money and a lot of resources that the mining companies can bring to bear. Clearly it's the case that I believe, and the British government believes, that the benefits that those companies, the international companies, but also the domestic Colombian companies can bring, can make a real difference to the very real levels of poverty in Colombia. And I guess the other side of the picture is the royalties that British companies have paid in Colombia. There's a debate about royalties. There'll continue to be a debate about royalties. There's a debate about royalties in just about every country around the world. So it's exactly those kind of issues which I certainly, as the ex-British ambassador to Colombia, do want to reflect on. I don't come to the post with any great prior knowledge, certainly of the situation in rural Colombia. The last time I went to Colombia for any length of time, one couldn't really travel to rural Colombia, and certainly not as a British diplomat. And that's why, for me, it's so valuable to hear from our colleagues in Colombia and the colleagues in the rural communities who are living this reality. So thank you very much for your question, and I think it's the right debate that we should be having today.
Come here. One here. Maybe we could just take these two and then see how we're doing the time. If you wouldn't mind giving your name first, and if you're from an organisation.
Hello, my name's Richard Solly from Colombia Solidarity Campaign and London Mining Network. It was interesting to hear your remarks as the next ambassador, and I wonder whether you could comment on two cases that we have been working on in London Mining Network, which shed an unfortunate light on British diplomatic activity. In Peru, Sir Richard Ralph, who was then ambassador, went to the area of the planned Monterrico metals mine in the north of the country to stir up local agricultural communities to enthusiasm for having this huge copper open cast mine come into their area, even though they had made it very clear on repeated occasions that they wished to live through organic agriculture and did not want to mine. There had been a lot of protests and the reward that the ambassador got for his help in furthering the interests of Monterrico Metals was that he became chair of it when he ceased being ambassador to Peru. In the case of Bangladesh, we've been assured recently by the Foreign Office that it is a necessary part of British diplomacy to further the interests of GCM Resources, which wishes to open an enormous open-cast coal mine at Fulbari in Bangladesh against the express wishes of local communities, tens of thousands of people demonstrating against it, and 6 of them having been shot dead by Bangladeshi security services in August of 2006. So it would be comforting if you were able to assure us that British diplomatic interests in Colombia will not pursue the interests of British multinationals in the face of community opposition. Would you be able to comment on that?
Can we just take the other?
Carl Doyle, University of Middlesex. I have a question I'd like to direct to both the speakers. The Constitutional Court of Colombia is probably one of the most progressive courts in the world, and has issued very interesting rulings in the context of indigenous people's rights and Afro descendants in Colombia. And the Colombian context is particular in that there's a large number of communities who are quite small in number and have experienced historically and contemporary problems that place them in a particular situation of vulnerability. And the court addressing this has signalled that in the context of mining and other development projects impacting on these peoples, there is a need not only for prior consultation, informed consultation, but that the safeguard that has to be met, the standard that needs to be met to guarantee their physical and cultural survival is the standard of free, prior and informed consent. And it's drawn on the jurisprudence of the Inter-American Court, it's drawn on the standards of the International Financial Corporation, the IFC, the World Bank, the Special Rapporteur. And I'm interested to hear what both speakers have to say on this, given that this standard is now becoming the standard, which the mining industry is also starting to engage with. The larger industry, or some companies like Rio Tinto, for example, are saying this is the standard. However, you have many companies, many big companies also, that haven't gone that far yet. So I appreciate some comments on that.
La Corte Constitucional incluso colombiana ha logrado dar contenidos importantes para el sistema internacional de reconocimiento de derechos de comunidades indígenas afrodescendientes respecto a la consulta previa.
The Constitutional Court in Colombia has even been able to give some content for the international recognition of due consent for indigenous Afro-descendant communities.
Incluyendo el sentido de lo que significa consentimiento libre.
Including what the meaning of free consent has to be.
Esos avances son importantes, sin embargo, las realidades que muestran de la aplicación son muy distantes.
These steps ahead are extremely important. However, when we look at the reality of the implementation, we can see that we're far away from them.
En primer lugar, porque las exploraciones no requieren del desarrollo de consultas previas y tampoco es exigible a las empresas y al Estado colombiano entregar la información sobre las bases por las cuales van a realizar unas operaciones de exploración en los territorios.
And firstly, because when we're talking about exploration, there is no need for a previous consultation, and the companies and the Colombian state are not do not need to give information on the basis for this exploration.
Hay una seria limitación del acceso a la información y por tanto de poder una comunidad local tener elementos suficientes para discutir con las empresas y también con el gobierno sobre lo que puede o no hacerse.
And this means there is very serious limitations when we talk of access to information, and therefore the communities do not have enough elements to have a proper conversation with companies and with governments when it comes to which can and which can't be done.
Ustedes van a escuchar más adelante un caso de una comunidad indígena donde se toma información no solamente satelital, sino a través de helicópteros y aviones privados, previa militarización del territorio, y esa información tomada desde hace más de 2 años no ha sido entregada a las comunidades.
Later today you will hear about an indigenous community where there has been militarization of the territory, and images have been taken through satellite and also from planes and helicopters, and this has been carried out for more than two years, and the information has not been passed on to the communities.
Entonces se puede consentir o no se puede consentir sobre la ausencia de información.
So we may wonder if we can have or not have consent if we are lacking information.
Un reciente informe sobre la aplicación de los principios rectores en comunidades indígenas de Naciones Unidas mostraba la necesidad de generar unas condiciones de equidad y de equilibrio en esas relaciones asimétricas del poder. Y un poder es la información. Tenerla y no tenerla es grave para poder discutir.
Recently, they were talking about the guiding principles of the United Nations regarding indigenous communities and about this need to have equality between the parts, because information is power and it's very serious not to have it.
Well, thank you very much for both questions. I mean, I think the link between the two is the importance of our companies both respecting Colombian laws and engaging with international norms. In terms of our work, the British government's work, obviously I'm better equipped to talk about Colombia, but still not very well equipped to talk about detail of cases in Colombia. What I would say, I think, is that what we are committed to is to working with British companies to ensure that they meet the highest possible standards. And central to that, to return again to the theme of the conference, really are the UN guiding principles. And within those principles, particularly in terms of respect and in terms of the obligation then to remedy, there are some pretty powerful mechanisms to hold companies to account. But what I would say is, I think the points that Daniel made are very powerful. A lot of the challenges are around relatively disempowered, relatively poor populations who don't have access to information, who don't have access to resources. And for that reason, it's tremendously important that the valuable work that is going on with civil society organisations in Colombia, with the civil society organisations in the UK, such as the International Mining Network, to bear witness where there are problems, where there are grave violations of human rights. That's an essential part of giving a voice to communities who are otherwise often silent.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we're going to move on and have coffee in a minute, but one of the things I forgot to say at the very beginning was that the UK at the moment is devising its strategy on business and human rights. And we're hopeful that this report and the conference will be able to feed into that. But also, as you've heard, the UK has been working with the Colombian government in developing a strategy on business and human rights. And we're also hopeful that the things that are said here today might be able to feed into that as well. So we've got coffee now, and if people could be back in their seats by 10:15, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.